So let's see. We're talking about the people in the building.
Yeah, okay. And those were the Ridgells. They were down in the front apartment downstairs. Now we lived immediately above them, so we heard everything. Okay. Now, so we had to go upstairs to our house. Okay. Now on the landing going to our apartment, you passed another apartment. Their names was Riley, Bob and Earlene Riley. They had one son. He might have been a junior, but they called him Butch. And we hear from Butch every now and then.
Was he about your age?
No, he was quite a bit younger than me. He was born there after we got there. And he came here a couple of times. He likes to come and have Lottie to cook for him. He likes Lottie's cooking. And nice. They were good neighbors. And the people downstairs, I don't remember their names.
How long did you live in that apartment?
From 9 to 19. I was 9 years old when we moved there, and I left to go into service when I was 19, so 10 years.
So the whole time you were in East Chicago?
That's where I lived.
So that was your father died, you were still living there?
Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, we hadn't been there long after when he died.
And do you remember what schools you went to when you went there?
Yeah. I started off at Lincoln School. Lincoln School went to the 5th grade. And when I went there, I was going into the 4th grade. So I went there 4th and 5th grade.
Do you remember anything about that school?
Oh yeah, I remember everything about it. I played basketball there, and all my buddies in the neighborhood went to school there. Everybody in the neighborhood, went to school there. And I had a lot of buddies around. When we grew up in East Chicago, there are all different nationality people, come to work in the steel mills. Polish and Mexican primarily, but they had Slovaks and Puerto Ricans and all different kinds of people.
So this is as you were growing up, though?
Yes.
Okay, so you knew people, all kinds of different people.
Right. But anyhow, I went to school at Lincoln School for 2 years, and then you move over to Riley School. Went through the 8th grade. So I was there for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
These are both in East Chicago?
Both in East Chicago. And then I went to the high school, which is Washington High School.
Okay, what kind of things were you interested in at that time? You said you played basketball.
Yeah, I played basketball. I played basketball more with my friends and my buddies than with the school, because when I got to be 13, I started working. I wanted to have pocket money, so I got a job delivering papers, and I delivered papers until I was, I think, 17 years old. I had a big route, and I did well.
How much money did you make per week?
Oh, anywhere from $15 to $25.
That was pretty good money, right?
Yeah, for me as a teenager, it worked out good. Because you see, my mother had 3 kids, and she was working to support us, and I didn't like asking her for anything. And I tried to. Time I wanted something, I had the money to buy it myself.
What type of work was she doing when she went there?
She worked in the mill.
Okay.
She was what they call her which is the lift truck. But anyhow, she worked in the mill.
So she was making decent money.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Until she got sick.
When did she
See,
get
my
sick?
mother got sick though. I guess maybe 3 years before I left.
So when you were about 16?
Yeah, when I was about maybe when I was either when I was 15 or 16.
What?
Well, she got tuberculosis.
So she couldn't work anymore.
And she couldn't work anymore. They sent her to a sanitarium, tuberculosis sanitarium, and she was in that for a year, maybe 2 years.
So at that time, all three of you are still teenagers.
Right.
So where did the three of you go?
We stayed there, and that's when Aunt Sarah came for, remember I told you about her being there? And then I had a second cousin who came and stayed with us for a portion of that time. All the time. I mean, these are people, these are family members that felt like they had a responsibility to take care of us. She came, she had a daughter, and they came and stayed with us. And then for a good period of time, one of my daddy's sisters came.
You remember
You see, we didn't, huh?
Do you remember who it was? So they would just kind of rotate in and... Now, how did she get tuberculosis, or does anybody know?
Nobody knows. Just from being, she was working like mad, and trying to keep us.
Days they would put people in the sanitarium. So
They had tuberculosis. It was a hospital. It was really a hospital.
right.
It was all, and they had them in rooms where apparently they gave them fresh air. Wintertime they had the windows open. It would be freezing.
Tuberculosis patients then.
But that's when streptomycin came out. So she started, which I guess really, and she was in the sanitarium. She used to make all kinds of stuff, doilies and stuff like that, and her friends would sell that stuff. That was income for us. Daddy had, when my dad died, he got Social Security checks. Or she got each of the kids, Plus, we had family with us. Didn't have to pay for that, you see. So that.
So, thing. Did you go and visit her? Like visiting people in the hospital?
But that was in Indiana. It took us about 2 hours.
And 2 hours to get back.
Hours to get back. We didn't see her that often.
So by the time she comes back home, it's pretty close to the time when you're leaving.
Yeah, I was.
And so you graduated from high school at about 18.
Yeah.
You worked as a paper.
I worked until I was about 17.
What you do?
I started working at a drugstore. I was primarily a soda jerk and soda fountain.
Did you have to wear a little outfit, cap and all that?
No, they didn't make me wear an outfit. I did everything behind the soda fountain. I sold everything in the whole store.
You didn't work in the pharmacy though?
No, they wouldn't let me do too much back then.
Okay.
But that's where I got introduced to this.
That was my question.
And I was, because see, all the time I was in school, ever since I was a little boy, they used to say, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to play in an orchestra. I was going to be a musician.
Now, did you play anything other than the clarinet?
Saxophone.
So you played saxophone?
Yeah.
Did you play in high school?
In high school. That's where I learned how to play. The band and the orchestra. I was a pretty good musician. At that age, I was an excellent musician. And I thought what I was going to do, go to school. I was taking lessons. I went to lessons every week, which I was paying for myself. my music finally said, "Now you're going to graduate, and when you go to college, if you're planning, oh yeah, I'm planning to go to college. Well, when you go to college, you go to Indiana U, you have to apply to get into the School of Music." She says, "No, I don't, and there won't be any problem." She says, "You're good enough to get in right now, and I can assure you." He says, "But I think I'm obligated to tell you I was interested in classical. I don't know if you've thought about making a living." He says, "You're going to have a hard time getting classical music, as a colored boy." And he said, the only thing you're going to be able to do is play with a dance band or something like that, and that's a little different than your kind of music you're interested in, but you could do that, or you can, so if you want to teach music, you can do that. So, but you really need to think about that, because all this time we've been, together, you're talking, I think it's great, and you're very good, Well, when I started thinking, wait a minute, now, the reason I want to go to college, I want to make some money. I'm trying to get myself out of where I've been. It wasn't all that bad, but I didn't have anything, and I wanted to do better. So then I started talking to guys at the drugstore, and I asked him about pharmacy, and I asked him how much pharmacists pay, and I thought, that's what I want to do. So that's what got me interested in pharmacy. When I graduated, I started going to Purdue pharmacy. I had an extension there in Hammond, Indiana, which is just 10, 15 miles away. That's where I started going to school.
Now, getting back to the music, so you played in the regular band, the high school band, or?
High school had a huge band and orchestra. The orchestra was directed by a man who was a music critic for one of the papers over in Chicago. And it was an outstanding orchestra. In the state of Indiana, they have competitions for all kinds of different stuff, including bands and orchestras. But he would not allow his orchestra to compete because he thought that would be unfair, because he knew too much, and so he did compete. But yeah, I played first chair solo clarinet and the band, and
So you played the clarinet mainly, or the saxophone?
clarinet. The only time I played saxophone is when we had school activities where we put together a dance band.
What kind of music influenced you at that time? I mean, you said you classical music.
It was classical.
Who exposed you to that? Where did you hear it?
I guess my dad. My dad, man. Yeah.
And did you listen to popular music at that time?
Oh yeah.
And he played some of that too.
Not a lot. I mean, a little bit with the saxophone. Like I said, we'd get a little band together, and I'd play for that. But I mainly stuck to classical music.
What type of music was popular at that point in time?
Blues and low, rhythm and blues, as they call it then.
So, at some point you just stopped playing, it sounds like.
I stopped playing when I went into the service.
In
52.
And never played again?
Times.
When's the last time you picked up?
10 years ago.
Oh, is that right? Play now, you think?
Oh yeah, I think I could.
Still have the chops?
Yeah. We were at the Kirkland's house one night. That was years ago, like I said, 10 years ago to me. And, Kirkland still plays. And he plays saxophone. And I said, I used to play clarinet. He said, you used to play? Yeah. You didn't believe me. He went back in the room, brought a clarinet out, and gave it to me. And I started playing In the Mood, you know. And he says, "No, he can't play that."
You still remember how to play?
I still remember that one. Yeah.
But you decided pharmacy might be a little more lucrative.
Yeah, well, now let me tell you now. That was the main reason, to make some money.
Right.
So I started school for pharmacy and went to Purdue. And at that time, the Korean War was on. And young men were being drafted. You know, the draft was in then. And the only way you could get a permit not to go was if you were going to school full time. You couldn't go part time. Well, I was going to school and working in the steel mill at the same time. I'd work nights in the mill and go to school during the day.
What were you doing at the steel mill?
I got hired as a rail turner, and I'll tell you that's something.
What is a rail turner?
I work in rail turners work in the mill where they make rails for the tracks of the train. That's one of the things. The other thing they make were I-beams, all different size I-beams. But the rail turner is when they were rolling rails. What they do is they take a huge piece of steel that's called an ingot, and an ingot is about 4 feet by 4 feet on the bottom, and it stands maybe twice as tall as this room. And it's a huge piece of solid steel. And they heat that thing up until it's almost white hot, and then they put it out on some rollers, rolling it like you would dough with rolling pins, huge rollers. And they roll it out, and it gets flatter, and then they turn it over, and they roll it some more, and it gets flatter on that side until it gets longer and longer and longer and longer. And then when it's down at the end, then they start, the rollers are shaped like that rail, you see. So when it comes out, it's a long, 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 long rail. And they take big saws and cut them off. Well, those rails are about 50 feet long. They cut them into 50-foot long pieces. And then they push them out on what they call a bed to cool. And there they are, one after the other, white hot. A rail turner's job, well, when those rails are out there cooling, as they cool, they'll warp. And remember, that's a long 50-foot rail. And as it cools, it'll warp like that. But if you could turn them over, then it'll start warping the other way. And by the time it's cool, it'll be straight, you see. Well, a rail turner had to turn those.
When they were hot?
When they were hot. And let me tell you.
They're heavy too, right?
Yes. 50 feet away, you can feel that heat just coming off of it. A rail turner is a long 6-foot piece of metal. It's a fork. And at the end of it, on the fork, it's got just two points on it like that. And what you had to do was take that fork and run real fast up there through that heat and stick it on the end of one of those rails and jump up in the air and turn it over and then run back away from that heat. By the time you got back to where you were, you were so hot your clothes would be steaming and burning. It was an inhuman thing.
So there's one guy turning this rail.
One guy. And after he turns one and gets his breath, cools off a little bit, he run back up there and grab another one and turn it over. And that's what a rail turner's job was.
How much did they pay you for rail turning?
I don't know. It was something like $1.25 an hour. It was nothing. And, well, now wait a minute now. I got this job. I had no idea what I was being hired for. And I went in there and I saw these guys. And they all wear real heavy clothes, you know, to keep the heat off of them. But those clothes only last for a week because then they're all burned up, you know, and they got to get some more and put them on. I saw these guys doing this inhuman thing, covering their face and running and grabbing, and then turning that over and run back. And I told them, man, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I can't do that. I'm sorry. I didn't know that's what I was supposed to be doing. They said, well, that's what you were hired. I'm sorry. When the man said, the foreman must have looked at me and felt sorry for me or something. And he says, well, I got a man on vacation and I need somebody to fill in. I'll give you another job until he comes back. And I ended up what they call a marker. They keep track of steel all the way from when it's an iron ore until it's a finished product. Because they know exactly what's in it, where it came from and all that. So you have to mark on the ends of those rails, for instance, you know. And that's what I ended up doing. And the guy came who was a marker, and I still can't do that, you know. So he gave me a job as what they call an operator. Somebody's got to move those rollers and make that stuff move from different places. And they gave me a job with there. And boy, the old guys were so mad. I got these jobs. They'd been there for years. Well, anyhow, I kept on moving around doing jobs like that. But I worked from 11 to 7 at night.
5 days a week?
5 days a week.
And then you go to school during the day?
And I went to school during the day. And I'd get 3 or 4 hours sleep in the evening before I went to work. But I, like my schedule was such that I couldn't go full time. And that meant I was going to get drafted. So I didn't want to go over to Korea and dodge bullets, you know. And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. So I said, shoot, I'm going to join. I'm going to join either the Navy or the Air Force. Well, in those days, a lot of people were doing the same thing, and they had quotas on how many people could go in. So I was having a hard time finding a place that had an opening. And I started going around the cities all around East Chicago, and I ended up joining in Kankakee, Illinois.
Now, what was the point in over getting drafted?
Well, the Air Force was not shooting. They were flying or either maintaining airplanes or something like that, you know. And the Navy, you know, out in the sea. So anyhow, I ended up joining the Air Force. And before I left to go, I got the notice saying, greetings, I've been drafted. But I had already joined, so I was okay.
So if you had not joined, you'd have been on your way to Korea.
Right. But anyhow, what I was leading up to is I went into the Air Force. In the Air Force, you go through basic training and a lot of schools and all this stuff, and they train you a lot of, and then you have to decide what you want to do in the service.
Now this was what year? About 1952?
52.
Okay.
And I looked through all the possibilities of things that I would want to do, and I could. One of the things they tested me on is music. They had me to play for them and all that, and I could have been in the band, you know. But I got to thinking, wait a minute. Now, I don't want to be in the band. It'd be easy, but I want to learn something while I'm in here. And one of them was going to radio school. And remember my uncle that was into radios. I thought of it, I said, hey, that ought to be cool. I'd like that. So I decided to go to radio school. And I was sent here, out to Scott Field. And I went through training, and after I trained, I stayed on as an instructor. And thought that, hey, this is a good thing. I maybe this is what I ought to do as for a living, you know.
So what, they teach you how to build radios or how to
repair them?
Repair them?
Well, you have to build them. First you learn how to build them, and you learn how to repair them. But I was in airborne radio navigational equipment, all the navigational equipment that's used in airplanes.
And so that went back to your interest when you were with your uncle.
With my uncle, right, and plus a couple of kits that I had built myself when I was a teenager. So, but anyhow, while I was in there, you know, you can go to school while you're in the service on your spare time. So I started going to school, and actually I was taking some classes in electronics, you know, thinking that maybe I'd pursue that. And I was getting really interested in that. And then I stayed on as an instructor and thought, man, teaching is great. I really enjoyed teaching, and I was good at it, you know, and I thought, well, maybe I ought to be a teacher, you know. Well, before I got myself too screwed, you know what, Lloyd Logan, you're going to be a jack of all trades, master of none. You better pick something and finish that, and then you can move into something else. Well, when I counted up all my hours of what I'd done, I had more toward pharmacy than anything else. So then I got back into pharmacy.
Now, how much schooling did you do before you went into service when you were in Hammond? How long did you go to school?
Just under 1 year.
Okay. So
that's how many credits I'd accumulated.
So you resumed it.
Yeah, and then I went, when I was in the service, I started going, first of all, Belleville Junior College, and it's got a different name over there now. And then I started going to WashU. I'm commuting back and forth to these.
You were living on Scott Air Force Base, right?
Yeah, well, stationed out there. And then I started at college pharmacy. St. Louis College Pharmacy.
Okay, so this was the first time you started coming to St. Louis.
Yeah, well, you mean to school?
Right.
Yes. But as soon as I got here, you know, at Scott Field, I was coming to St. Louis every weekend. You know.
What was going on in St. Louis?
Party, good times. We had a lot of good times in St. Louis.
So how was St. Louis in the early 1950s?
A lot of fun. We enjoyed it. But no, wait a minute. Let me tell you this. It was a long time before I really discovered St. Louis. It was East St. Louis in those days. East St. Louis is where you went to have a good time. They had at least a dozen different nightclubs. It was against the law, but they had all kind of gambling places over there. You know, they had a lot of girls, good-looking girls, and it was a great place to go. And you know, even after I met Lottie and we were dating and all, when we go out, we go to East St. Louis.
They stayed open later too, right?
All night. Yeah, because even after we started coming to St. Louis, you know, after the places would close over here, we go over to East Side.
So now you were interested in gambling back then, right?
Well, I did very little gambling then. No, I didn't go back in. See, that was a back room in those places over there, and I never did go in those. No, I wasn't. I didn't really. Gambling is. Let me tell you when gambling really became interesting to me. When I went to Las Vegas for the very first time, and I went with your parents.
Which was when?
1970, I think it was.
And what was it about that
Their club had a trip that they took to Las Vegas, and they brought friends with them, you know. So Lottie and I went with them out there, and man, that was something else. That was something else. Not just the gambling, you know. The shows were just unbelievable, just unbelievable.
So you've liked it ever since?
Man, ever since I've enjoyed it. Yeah.
But you didn't have a lot of money back in this time anyway to gamble, right?
Oh no. I don't have a lot of money to gamble now.
That's another story, right?
Yeah.
All right, so we're let's see. So you're taking the pharmacy classes.
Yeah, and well, I went on and finished pharmacy, and those things that where I've been wasting time, and there were classes that I should have. Ended up taking extra classes to fill those in. There were 2 semesters when, believe it or not, I had 23 hours per semester.
And you were also doing other things too, right? Or you were a full-time student?
No, Are you kidding? I had 23 hours in school, and I was working something like 54 hours at the hospital. I worked at the St. Louis University hospitals after I got out of the service.
Now, was it difficult being black at that time, or what? In the service?
In the service, it wasn't at all. It was not at all. I was after I got out of my training, and of course, there was no problem at all. I became an instructor, and I was in charge. The only time it ever came up is that, you know, at the end of every class, every time we graduated a class, they had them to give a critique of all of the instructors. Mm-hmm. And every now and then we get some of those boys from down south, you know, the white boys from down south, and they say, oh, they need to send him down to Alabama and maybe he'd learn how to treat people, you know, stuff like that. Every now and then you'd see something like that, but I had no trouble at all. When the very first time I came to St. Louis, I had basic training in California, Oakland, California, just outside of San Francisco. And when we went to town on weekends, you know, it was wide open in California, and so that wasn't even on my mind. Well, I chose the school out here at Scott Field. We got on the train and came to St. Louis, and didn't have to report until the next day. So we decided to get a hotel room.